Hey everybody, and welcome to the inaugural episode of AWS On Air Sports. My name is Nick Betts, sports enthusiast, tech novice, and I will be your host as we dive into the intersection of professional sports and this cool new trend I keep hearing about called cloud computing. Tonight, I'll be joined by some awesome folks from our sports partnership teams here at AWS as they explain how the heck this cloud computing stuff got into the world of sports. Should be really fun, but before we jump into all that, let's hit the intro.
That's how I do it. Yeah, that's how
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. Like I was saying, my name is Nick. I will be your goofball host / roasting target for this series called AWS On Air Sports. I'm joined backstage by my awesome producer, Taylor Bennett, and by my somewhat decent manager, Debbie Harvey, in the comments section as we run this show. So this is a live show, and we love to see interaction in the comments. So if you have any questions over the course of the show, please drop them in the chat, and we will do our best to answer them. We're really excited to kick off this new series with you all today. But before we get into all that, quick introduction to myself. I've been working at AWS for almost 5 years now. Usually he's kind of a backstage guy for all of our product launches in marketing. I'm also a huge sports fan, Colorado born and raised, so go Broncos and Avalanche. Don't want to see any Chiefs in that comments section. So I knew that AWS had all of these really cool sports partnerships, right? I see them every day on NFL games, the StatDat commercials, right? Or in the NHL playoffs when we're talking about predicting who's going to win the face-off. But even though I've been here for a couple of years, I had no idea how these sponsorships actually worked. And we were kicking around some new ideas for a show, and that's how this came to be. So the goal of this show is to answer both how professional sports leagues are using this cloud computing capability for things like advanced stats, how it's changing their game, and then also kind of what we're doing on our end to make those solutions happen and kind of give everybody a broad introduction into cloud computing. I've been talking to our sports team for a few months now. It's honestly crazy how much stuff that we do back there. I had no idea the breadth of these issues and kind of what exactly we're doing for all these pro leagues. So I'm pumped to share that information with all of you. Now, I can confidently say that after 5 solid years of working for the world's most comprehensive, broadly adopted cloud computing platform, that I still know almost nothing about cloud computing. So if you are a novice to this area, that's totally fine. I am too. You're going to be learning right alongside of me as we talk about how exactly all this cloud computing stuff works, what these use cases are for sports, and figure out kind of what all of this is. So don't worry if you're a beginner. I am too. And if you're new to tech like me, fret not, right? Again, don't be afraid to drop those questions in the chat. I'll be happy to shout them out to our other guests as they explain all this crazy stuff to me. So starting today, every other Thursday, we're going to be featuring a new league and a new use case. We're going to have guests from those pro leagues like the NFL, the NHL, Bundesliga, all this other cool stuff, diving into exactly what that tech is doing to their game and how cloud computing is kind of evolving what they'll do. And then we'll bring in a couple of tech experts from our company, and they'll explain how the heck all this stuff works. So like Devin's asking in the comments right now, how we're able to look at player movements as the game is going along, right? So for this first episode, we're going to explore the background of our sports program. So no leagues today. We're going to be looking at our internal teams and asking them how cloud computing even got involved in sports, right? That is something that I did not know existed until a few years ago. And I thought it was a really cool story to start off this program. We'll be having Julie Sousa join us. She is a fantastic tech expert that kind of explains how all these solutions even come to be. We have Doug Buser, who's somebody on our communication side that talks about how all these partnerships are formed. And starting off, we're going to have Kristen Schaff, who leads our sports team. She is on vacation right now, but we pre-recorded a really cool segment with her earlier this week. So you're going to notice a really deft change of outfit from me because we pre-recorded that. But as soon as that segment's over, we'll be right back here for the rest of the show live with Doug and Julie. But before we get into that, let's hear from Kristen. Let's get that going. All right. Thanks so much for that introduction, Nick. Might I say you're doing a great job hosting this first show. We have Kristen Schaff with us right now. She's the head of sports marketing for AWS. Thanks for joining us today, Kristen.
Thanks for having me. Nice to be here.
Yeah, we're excited. What exactly does the head of sports marketing do for AWS? What does that mean?
Good question. Good question. Well, I get to lead a really awesome team within marketing and work with some of the world's most innovative sports organizations, teams, leagues, etc. So we get to partner with them to drive technology innovations that enhance how fans and players and others consume the world of sports. So it's a pretty fun world to get to be in.
Absolutely. I got to say, just talking to you and your team over the last few weeks as we were kind of planning this show, there's so many cool things that you guys do. I can't wait to dive into it with everybody. But before we get into that, what is your personal connection to sports? Do you have a favorite team?
I do. I grew up in Seattle, so my Seahawks fandom runs deep.
It's been
I'm
good
sure
having
you can relate.
Kristen. I think we're having technical difficulties. My producer is saying we need to drop you. I'd
be saying that too if I was a Broncos fan. So
let's hopefully Russell remembers how to ride this year, or even just get the car going, and that would be wonderful for Broncos fans. 2013 was a rough year for me, man.
I love it. I relish in it.
It's like he's beaten us twice, really. First in the Super Bowl and then now. But
yeah, we could talk about that Super Bowl for the next 30 minutes. I'd be happy to do that.
We're just going to go ahead and deftly change topics before I start speaking again. I guess we'll keep you on, even though you're a Seahawks fan. I guess you've got some interesting things to say. So can you tell us, why is AWS involved in sports? Everybody kind of knows us more for being cloud computing and, the internet and kind of the backbone of all these different tech companies. Why are we involved in sports? How did that happen?
Well, what you just said is really the reason. There's such a incredible pace of innovation happening in the world of sports, where such small, nuanced adjustments to technology, to operations, to utilizing data makes such a difference between winning and losing and the fan experience. And so we're really fortunate that a lot of sports customers have chosen to work with AWS to drive a lot of those innovations.
Yeah. And, speaking of those partners, who are some of the leagues that we work with? I know we've got a lot of big names in our lineup, but I don't think many of my friends or family actually know what we do in the sports world. So who are some partners?
Yeah. Well, I think an easy one to highlight that a lot of folks are probably pretty familiar with is the National Football League. We do a lot with them with the Next Gen Stats program. So if you've watched an NFL game on a Thursday, a Sunday, a Monday, really any day of the week, it seems now, you've probably seen some of the integrations that we've run with the National Football League, which highlight some of the data and analytics and statistics that we're bringing to the sport. But yeah, we work with some of the world's premier sports entertainment properties. So Formula One, National Football League, National Hockey League. We've also entered into the world of esports. So we partner with Riot Games and their esports division, League of Legends, which I imagine a number of folks who are tuning in today are probably pretty familiar with. So a really robust portfolio of partners that we get to work with, and all of which are really different in terms of how they're, working with and collaborating with AWS to drive. I know I keep saying the word innovation, but innovative solutions for their customers and their fans.
Yeah, we do have such a wide breadth of them. I know we can't get into details now, but for the rest of this show, kind of as the series progresses, we'll be diving into the details of a lot of these partnerships and the specific use cases. What are some of the more common ones you see? Do you see any overarching themes between what all these leagues are asking for?
I mean, a little bit. Really, they're looking for technology to differentiate them from their competitors. And while we think of competitors being traditional in a sense, where, the Seahawks are competitive to the Denver Broncos on the field, it runs beyond the teams, but it goes into the front office. And so those organizations are looking at ways that they can differentiate, whether it be when you walk into the stadium, what that experience looks like, or how you engage with the app to download tickets, or really any of the components that happen behind the scenes that make that experience you have as a fan seamless and enhanced. And so I would say the use cases are similar in that they're all trying to drive and use technology, and specifically AWS technology, to differentiate themselves from other organizations in this space.
Yeah, that's super cool. I know you mentioned next gen stats. I feel like that's the one, when I'm talking to my friends about the show, or kind of what I mentioned that I work at AWS, everybody, that's the main thing people know is the that commercials and next gen stats and all of that. You kind of expand on that program a little bit. How exactly, I feel like every time I turn on NFL, NHL, whatever now, there's some sort of stat being populated on my screen that says sponsored by AWS. And it's like for something that happened 10 seconds ago. How exactly does something go from a play on the field or a prediction, to a stat within seconds for us as viewers? Like, what's the behind that?
It is pretty cool, right? And it is fun to be a part of the making of those stats behind the scenes. And you'll hear from Julie later, who drives a lot of that. But your example, so next gen stats, NFL, there's a lot of data being pulled off of player tracking in real time. And we're analyzing that data against millions of other data points, utilizing AWS machine learning and leveraging different AWS services like SageMaker to build and train and run predictive models for real-time statistics. So this all happens behind the scenes. And again, we're combining a bunch of different data points and on-field action and cloud technology to give fans in real time a better understanding of what their favorite players are doing, being able to predict what's going to happen on the next play. So you've seen some of our next gen stats integrations around, what's the probability that that pass is going to be completed. There's so many data and analytics that go into that analysis. And while it plays out in real time, it's a lot of work that has been done to lead up to that moment. So again, millions of data points that have been analyzed, both from a historical archive standpoint down to all of the tracking that sits on players in real time to help predict those moments, which is such a cool experience for a fan. If you think about, watching an NFL game 10 to 15 years ago, it's leaps and bounds different. And I think now fans are both accustomed to and expect that their experience is enhanced with that type of real-time analytics, and not only on the TV screen, but then they want to go to an app and be able to dive deeper. They want to go to, AWS.com/sports, little name drop there, to learn more about what did go on behind the scenes of that stat that I just got to consume.
Yeah, great. Very subtle name drop there. I think Debbie running our chat right now can drop that link in for everybody to look at.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. Well, and there is a lot of so if folks do want to learn more, there's some really awesome deep dive stories about what we're doing in the world of sports, and just that confluence of sports, entertainment, technology, innovation that AWS is really a part of.
Yeah, there's definitely, I got lost in that website when we talked about doing the show for the first time for about a week. Did not do most of the rest of my job. Don't tell Debbie that.
That's good. I like to hear that.
It was really cool to read into all this stuff. And you're right, it has changed. I was just thinking back as a Broncos fan, I don't know if I could have survived the Tebow era if we had predictive analytics.
Oh, yeah. Well, that would have been kind of fun, actually.
Actually, yeah, it should have been a 100% win. And you would
fractional probabilities.
Yeah, yes. Throw it out. We know Tebow's going to do it. No, but it is really cool, and it is fun to look back 15 years ago at kind of what we expected to see out of a game versus what we expect to see now. And all these extra tools that broadcasts have and then analysts have real time to explain the game better to everybody. My last question, I'm just kind of curious, you've been running this for a bit. You're really obviously involved in our sports program. You talk about the evolution of what was like 15 years ago for the viewer? What was the evolution kind of from our end? Like, how did this kind of start to where it is now?
Our participation in the sports world.
Yeah, like how did it start? Like,
Yeah.
I assume players weren't wearing all these trackers and stuff right away.
Yeah.
So what was our foot in the door?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it starts the way everything else starts for us, which is working backwards from the customer. And so I sort of spoke to that previously, where in the world of sports, it's so important that there's innovation, because there's fractional differences between winning, losing, being the best franchise, being the worst franchise. And so we just listened to customers in this space and realized that we could really transform the sports and entertainment landscape by building innovative technology solutions, utilizing our services. So it's no different than any other industry. We work backwards from the customer, and a lot of the things we've built with and for these sports entertainment customers translate industries. There's a lot of
some examples of that. Like, what have we done for sports? I think it's such a cool use case everybody relates to, right? It's like, how can we do this same sort of thing for other industries? How does this work translate to somebody that's trying to start a small business, or somebody that's trying to think about coming to the cloud? Like, how does that translate?
Yeah, in many ways. I mean, so there could be a use case, which is we're just trying to understand what cloud is. And we've worked with sports customers who fall into that category. So we can really help with, okay, well, what does that migration look like, whether it be partial or holistic? So there's that piece of it. There's pretty much every company on the planet right now is trying to figure out how to utilize their own data, analyze that data, and use that data to make better business decisions. So that's another example that's translatable, transferable across every single business. And so while the use cases in sports seem hyper-specific, where, okay, we're analyzing all this data in real time, we're pulling archival data, and that plays out in the form of a next-gen stat. If you think about that for your own business, there's a similar use case somewhere in there. And so, yeah, I mean, we do look at that. We look at, okay, we've built this solution over here for the Seahawks, which makes them better than the Broncos. Great. How does that use case transfer in probably a tweaked way into other industries?
Awesome. Yeah, I can't wait to dive more into that. I know we've got some other people from your team joining me in a second here. Can you kind of cue them up? Who are we going to be talking to next?
I think you're talking to Julie Souza next, who you're really going to enjoy. She leads our sports practice within a group called Professional Services, which she can tell you a little bit more about. It's a very, very cool role. She's the one who gets to be behind driving all of these really cool, innovative solutions that our team on the marketing side then gets to talk about and build stories around. And then you will be talking to Doug Buser, who is the one writing all of those stories and populating all that content on the website that have a link to go visit and learn more. So yeah, you'll really enjoy chatting with the two of them.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us. I know you're going on vacation tomorrow, well-deserved vacation. So I hope you have fun with that. Thanks for agreeing to pre-record this segment with us beforehand.
Yeah.
If anybody has any questions about anything Kristen just said, I'd encourage to check out that link we dropped to the Dash On Air, or the Dash Sports page. It's definitely going to be one of many times I mentioned that this broadcast. But thanks for joining us, Kristen. We'll send it back to Nick at the desk at the live show to talk to Julie and Doug.
Thanks.
All right. That was a really cool conversation. I loved talking with Kristen. I could have talked to her for hours, honestly. There were so many cool things she was telling me backstage about everything that we do. And another quick mention of that link, it's right here, aws.amazon.com/sports. That is the homepage for all of these cool sports partnerships we're going to be diving into today and for the rest of this series as the year progresses. So I encourage you to check out that link. Also thought this was a pretty funny comment that rolled across my screen as that was going. it almost certainly started from one disgruntled fantasy football player. I mean, nobody wants to have to do that Waffle House challenge after they lose. So I probably would have started this too if I knew how to do computer stuff. So next up, like Kristen said, we're going to be joined by Julie Sousa. So we're going to give her a quick intro here. All right, so a little technical difficulties. Gotta love the live show, though. What is going on, Julie?
Hey, I'm here now, right?
What was that?
I'm here now, yeah?
Yeah, definitely. Appreciate you joining us. Now, before we get going, I think it's important to everybody watching for us to establish that we do, in fact, love sports. So, are you a fan? Well, who's your team?
I am a rabid Michigan Wolverine. So I don't want to see any comments about any Buckeye nonsense. I'm going to ignore all of it.
Just Ohio State, right? None of that nonsense.
No, I'm all right. Everybody else I can get along with. Ohio State, I'm not having it. No.
Man, that two-year winning streak, I think, is getting to y'all's head maybe just a little bit.
Dude, it was so long. It was so long.
Nothing is more funny to me than talking to Michigan fans after that first win in like 7 decades. Y'all over the moon. Yeah, we got some more.
I see you.
Getting some comments. There we go. I'm a little disappointed. I thought, the Ohio State would have more people watching, but I guess Michigan's just got a better fan base.
Yes, we do. We do, in fact.
All right. Now, it says that you are the head of Sports Pro Serve. You corrected me beforehand that does not mean you just have a wicked tennis serve. So what exactly is Pro Serve?
ProServe, short for professional services. So it's sort of the in-house consultancy here at AWS that helps our customers better understand how they can leverage technology to solve business problems. Very much what Kristen said, working backwards from customer needs, right? Driving fan engagement, increasing monetization, optimizing efficiencies in operations. That's the stuff we work backwards from and use all this really cool tech to help make really cool stuff happen in sports.
Yeah, and I can't wait to dive into that with you for the next couple of minutes here. Before we do, though, I want to take a quick second. I saw we got a couple of new people joining our show. This is AWS On Air Sports, guys. Welcome to the show. This is where we are going to be talking about all those things you see on the NFL and NHL, like next-gen stats or face-off probabilities or the tracking stats that you see in soccer leagues like the Bundesliga. I never knew what the heck those were, and I work for the company that makes them. So we made this show to let everybody kind of learn along with me how all these things happen, what they mean, and also how they're changing sports. Because I know 20 years ago, like watching the NFL, I never would have thought all these things were even possible, much less that they would be so integrated into the game with everything from roster decisions to broadcasting. So looking forward to having you all joining us. I want to take that quick second and welcome our new guest, but let's bring it back to you, Julie. We were talking before the show about how passionate you are about tech sports or tech in sports, and you've got a pretty unique view about it. You're telling me about these 5 main pillars. I wanted to quickly share those with our audience. What exactly does that mean? What is your unique view going about all these technical solutions for sports?
Sure. I think, we're sort of tracking, since we're talking to lots of different players in the ecosystem, whether it's teams or leagues or tech partners or broadcasters, really we're seeing themes emerge and coalesce around these 5 big pillars. One of them we've spent a lot of time talking about already, which is performance analytics that's coming out of sports, right? Whether it's optical tracking through cameras or sensors in the jerseys or uniforms, we're getting this granular data. In the case of the NFL, for example, we're collecting 300 million points of data per season, right?
That's crazy.
It's crazy. Not as crazy as F1, 1.1 million points of data per second off those cars. Crazy, right?
Yeah,
so nobody's sitting there with Excel or figuring that out. This is machine learning, required in these instances. And you think about the use cases for that, it's everything from like player health and safety and rule development and officiating analysis to game strategy, like Moneyball, right?
Yeah.
And then for fans, we're using this data to, you know, edify an audience, to tell new stories, which Doug is super adept at doing, right?
Yes.
And, you know, if sports betting is legal where you live, that might inform that as well, right? So lots of use cases.
No, not at all. Not at
around
all.
that performance data. That's sort of like I love it. I get very passionate talking about that. We're also seeing a lot in terms of these pillars around live cloud production. So if anybody's ever been to a big, you know, sporting event, you see those big OB trucks, those big production trucks in the parking lot and whatnot. Well, producing a game, it's a pretty terrestrially taxing thing to do, right? You're shipping equipment, people, renting these trucks.
We don't just have one camera at the 50-yard line anymore.
Right. No, right.
Oh, okay.
So it's a lot. So how do we move some of these production workloads to the cloud to do it cheaper, faster, more sustainably, right? Open ourselves up to worldwide talent and not just who happens to be, you know, in Denver on a Thursday night, right? So
all the cool people, that's who's in Denver.
Right, there we go. So live cloud production is a big area of interest. Next generation direct to consumer streaming, you're seeing a lot there. I mean, Prime Video, we could talk about that all day and some of the new things there, like Prime Vision and whatnot.
Yeah, I know Doug and I were just talking a little bit earlier today. We'll probably hit on this a little bit later, but I know related to like leagues like the Bundesliga and such are trying to see like if they can get broadcasting more like remote. Like you don't have to necessarily fly out. Like that's huge for efficiency and kind of fuel costs and all that stuff. So
all of that
really,
stuff.
That's the area that I don't think a lot of us as fans realize is even happening, and kind of how we're evolutionizing the game is like even broadcasting.
Like how we get the game to you, and then never mind all the data and other cool stuff we can put on top of it, right?
Yeah.
And then you get to direct to consumer, and it's all this interactivity and engagement and monetization and personalization that can happen. So there are through lines in all of these pillars, really, right? You know, one other big area, and I'll go through those last two pillars real quickly: fan analytics. How do we know our fans better so we can serve them better, right? And then smart venue. Like, how do we make sure the venue experience is amazing and solve some of those persistent problems?
So what does that mean? Like stadium integration? Like, what are we talking about there?
Like, if you talk to a venue operator and they say, like, these are the two biggest complaints we get from like fans ubiquitously: ingress, egress, so getting in and out of the venue, right? And concessions. And what do those two things have in common? Lines, right? So leveraging things like Just Walk Out technology, right? Or Amazon One for frictionless identity management and things like that. Those are things that make the fan experience a lot better. And in the case of something like Just Walk Out, you're actually getting more people transacting and buying concessions or buying merch. And so that's more lucrative for the teams and venues as well. So
yeah, I don't think I've ever been more stressed in my life than when I went to that first Just Walk Out store that I visited. And I felt
like you were stealing, right? Didn't you feel like my kids thought we
like
were?
that? And also my friends and I were like, can we trick this system? And we tried as hard as we could and could not.
No.
But I think the main takeaway for our audience, everybody, you heard it here first. AWS is getting rid of lines at stadiums. I think that is the major takeaway. Love AWS for that. So I do know we've been talking a lot before the show too about all the different projects that AWS is involved in the sporting world. We kind of hinted at a couple of them here. Can you kind of tell us a couple of like your most recent or most exciting examples of AWS projects that we've taken on in the sports world? Like what are some sports projects we currently do or just recently released?
Let me talk about golf for a second. So PGA Tour, for example, with the players, first of all, there's 100 in the tournament, there's 156 players playing 18 holes, right? That's a lot of golf being played in an average telecast. 15% of those shots are actually televised, right? So there's a lot that's not being televised. So the PGA Tour with their Players Championship took on the goal of producing every shot live. Every shot from, you know, on every hole, every player was televised and pushed to the cloud. Now, what's cool about that is if you're a broadcaster in Scandinavia, for example, and you're getting the broadcast feed because you have the distribution rights in your local market, you're going ahead with that 15%, right? That's what you're showing. Now, if you actually have access to all the shots and your hometown favorite, Victor Hovland, for example, is not in the on the leaderboard, but you can still create your own broadcast that's going to be more relevant to your local audience, right? By interspersing the leaderboard and every shot that Victor Hovland takes on the course,
right? So you can start making this content way more resonant to, globally in different markets. So I think that's a super cool thing they're doing. Another example,
I think that one's really cool. Like even as somebody that watches, the US Open or all these different PGA Tour events, like sometimes you get really invested in an underdog player. It's not necessarily somebody that they show all the time, and you're always like, my goodness, when are they gonna show Joe Smith again so I can see his next shot, right? So I think that's super cool. Like I read about that coming out this summer as we were kind of prepping to do this show. I was so excited. I didn't realize that was a capability. That's really cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. So that's sort of that production in the cloud thing, right? And distribution in the cloud. Another cool, let's go back to the stats because I love it so much. But I think the cool thing about these analytics is, first of all, they should improve the fan experience. They should make you feel closer to the game. It shouldn't be intimidating. It shouldn't be alienating. If that data is coming out and it's somehow interfering with or making it feel inaccessible,
or it doesn't make sense,
then we're doing it wrong, right, Nick? It should be in a way that actually improves someone's understanding the game and enjoyment of the game. And we've seen that pan out. Bundesliga, which we mentioned earlier, Bundesliga Match Facts, right? They surveyed their fans afterwards, and it was over like 97% of the respondents to the survey were like, Match Facts helped and improved our game viewing, our match viewing experience, right?
Yeah, because those kinds of things let it take you, like, you're at the bar watching with your friends, and you're like, I don't think he can make this kick, or I don't think the free kick's going to go in, and then actually seeing the probability of all that stuff makes it so much more fun to watch as a fan. It makes you kind of appreciate those underdog moments a little bit more.
Well, and the athleticism and like the fact that had a 12% shot chance of going in, and he threaded that needle, right? He made that shot. Exactly. So that's cool. And I also think it's just really cool to think about like the new stuff we can uncover, right? And we were talking about this before, Nick, with baseball, right? And this is, let's go back to baseball was one of the early, folks in this space with sabermetrics. But when we used to look, I was a baseball fan growing up, and batting average was like how, the determinant of whether or not you were a solid offensive player.
Right? Got to hit 300 to be the best, right?
100%, right? You got to be over 300. Well, then you start looking at the data and you realize, hey, whether or not, what impacts our ability to win as a team is whether or not you get on base, right? It doesn't matter how you got there, just whether or not you got on base. That is a better measure of your offensive value to this club, to this team, right? So now all of a sudden you have, go back to Moneyball, Kevin Euclid, the Greek god of walks, right? Not Greek, whatever.
Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill changed the game.
They did. Thank you, Brad Pitt, right? I mean, and so now you have OBP, right? And then OBP on base percentage, evolves into OPS, on base percentage plus slugging, right? And those are now more the de facto standards we look to measure offensive value in a player in baseball. So that's really cool to see an analytic change how we look at players and value them and see them more fully, right?
Yeah.
So this is the stuff that's really exciting. And that's just one example of what you can do with this data.
Yeah, I've been diving into some of this stuff, like I said, since we started talking about starting this show. And it's so cool. Like, that's such a good example that's kind of relatable, like batting average versus OPS, right? It's like that next level of, let's look beyond just how far a guy can throw or how fast somebody is in a 40. Like Jerry Rice probably wasn't the fastest 40, but he's the best receiver ever because he had all those secondary metrics that are just unbelievable, right? So, or Jerry Judy's fast feet, which is going to come in handy this year against the Seahawks. So like, it's really cool that we're able to kind of dive deeper. And I know we're going to kind of dive into Doug with kind of how we communicate those projects, how we talk about this with these teams, how we come about these ideas. But from your end, how do these ideas come about, like broadly speaking? Does the league just come to us and say, hey, like, what stat can we do? Like,
sometimes. I mean, sometimes it's not, right? But I'll say, like, my team, we all come out of the industry, right? I used to lead business development at ESPN. I was at Second Spectrum that plays in the player tracking and analytics space. So, the guy on my team who worked in production for the NHL and Major League Baseball. So we're all coming to it with a lot of industry experience, which I think makes sure that we're solving for real problems and it's not tech for tech's sake, right? This is, technology in furtherance of ultimately serving the fan, which is our job, right? I mean, everything we do should be so that, the fan feels closer to that affinity. And so, whether it's producing a game in a more efficient way. I mean, the cool thing about producing in the cloud is that it frees up time for people to do really cool, creative things like alternate broadcasts, whether it's like a Prime Vision analytic broadcast, or it's what the NHL just recently did with Big City Greens and leveraging their tracking data to change all the players into characters from the Big City Greens cartoon, right? Like that, which resonated with a tween girl audience. I don't know if that's what they were going for, but that is awesome. The tween girls were like, I'm in. I love the NHL, right? Yeah. So it's, I just think there's, I think coming out of the industry and really understanding the business models and the players in the ecosystem and those challenges and the very complicated rights landscape helps us see around corners a little bit. We understand the tech and how that can solve some of those problems, but it's really partnering with our customers, right? The leagues, the teams, what are you trying to see? What are your problems? Okay, let us help think about that and be creative with you and move the ball forward, so to speak.
Yeah, I like the sports reference there, keeping it on brand for the show here. So I know we could talk about this for hours, right? All the different stuff AWS is doing. But something else I wanted to ask for some of our people watching that aren't theoretically part of the sports community, right? Is these same capabilities, they're getting those 1.1, you said, million data points from F1 races and stuff. What, how can we use those in kind of other settings? Are there how does this relate to somebody that's trying to start a business, right?
Well, I mean, I think it goes back to a little bit what Kristen said too, and she was answering a slightly similar question. It's all about the technology at its core and what it enables, right? So in the case of the NFL, for example, and creating their schedule, there are literally 1 quadrillion, I counted, that's 15 zeros, different, schedules that could potentially be created, right? So that what that means at its core, distilling it down to, sort of generic speak, is that when you have a lot of data that you need to process to be able to make an informed decision, that's what we can do. That's what the compute power, that's what SageMaker can do. That is what machine learning can do. And doing it the most efficient way possible, right? Instead of having racks and racks of servers that you have to invest in to do this sort of compute, you can leverage spot instances or the platform of the cloud to run those simulations for you much more efficiently. I think doing it on AWS, they saved about $2 million, literally.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Right?
We actually talked to the NFL scheduling guys a couple of months ago. I encourage everybody watching to check that out. I'll see if we can drop a comment to our 2023 on air playlist. It was from a couple of months ago. And we talked to him about how did changing the schedule, because it was a really cool use case, right? How did you do a schedule for the NFL season 20 years ago versus now?
Right.
They said 20 years ago is literally, they have to take so many different variables into account.
26,000.
Yeah.
26,000 variables.
Back in the day, he just whiteboarded for 6 months with his team. And they'd come up with a couple of schedules and hope that, they thought of everything. And nowadays, he says they have a couple of different schedules they generate every day. And they're just iterating on that for months and months. And 100%. They're able to take into account additional things like free agent signings or rookie draft classes as they happen. And that's how we get all these cool rivalries, like Tom Brady versus Peyton Manning, or Peyton came to the Broncos and we want to see him play the Colts, or Russ opening against the Seahawks last year. Like that. I know I'm using a lot of Broncos examples. You can probably tell my bias here, but it really is a cool use case. And I do think that's really relatable for people. We went from something that we were whiteboarding and hoping to get it right to suddenly we can do this, every day and take into account more variables than I can probably list.
100%. So you could do it for the NFL. You could do that with, financial modeling. You could do it with healthcare, life sciences, and things like that. So I think there's a lot of applicability to the base technology. I'm just really fortunate that I get to work in applying that technology to sports, which is so much fun.
Honestly, like, don't tell Debbie, but I'm talking to you. I'm like, I'm on the wrong team, man. I need to get over there. It's some fun stuff over here. So we'll kind of get over to Doug here. I want to make sure we have enough time left for him. But before we say bye to you, what is something that you're most excited about that's come out recently or that y'all are working on? If you can give us a little preview of something, or I guess something that happened recently. I know we just came out with some new stats recently for Bundesliga. Like, what's the most exciting project that you've completed recently?
Oh gosh, I think we're doing some really cool stuff with NASCAR right now, with in-venue and leveraging sort of that live production to pull a bunch. If you're watching a NASCAR race, you're in one position, right? But there's action happening all the way around the course, especially when you start doing these city races, right? They just did a city race in Chicago. Yeah. So we were able to pull in 56 camera feeds into their app so that real time, wherever you were along the course, you could see. Yeah, that's cool stuff.
Yeah, where people are. Yeah, well, actually, NASCAR is going to be one of our episodes coming up here. So I'll be sure to ask everybody that. If you're interested in that, watching right now, be sure to tune in. Again, this is AWS On Air Sports. For those of you just joining us, I'm here with Julie Sousa, the head of our Sports Pro Serve. Basically just the coolest tech lady I know in the sports field. We're talking about how things like next-gen stats in the NFL or the NHL or Bundesliga match, all that stuff, how it happens, how it's changing sports. Julie, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to let you go. If anybody has any questions for Julie, be sure to drop them in the chat. We'll try to get them answered as best we can. But thanks for hopping on tonight.
Thanks for having me, Nick.
Yeah. All right. Awesome talking to Julie. There's so many cool things that her team does. It's just crazy to me. It's mind blowing. I kind of usually end speechless from the meetings with them. But our next guest is Doug Buser. He's from more of the content marketing side. So he's the guy that's kind of my go-between talking to all these leagues for this show about setting up these interviews, what they're talking about, what they're excited about, and how we kind of communicate these stories to our fans and to our customers. So let's quickly introduce him. What's going on, Doug? Thanks for joining us tonight.
It's doing well. How you doing?
Good, man. How's the LA life treating you?
It's good. I'm down here for the Riot Games Valorant Championship. So excited to be down here. Riot Games is one of our sports partners.
Yeah.
So excited to be on site. And if you haven't been to an esport event, they are something else.
It's crazy how much that space has grown. Like, I still remember in high school logging on to like Minecraft for the first time, and it's just pro sport or esports have really taken off. So that's something I'm sure our Twitch audience is going to love hearing about. That's one of the other things we're going to cover here on Air Sports in the coming months. Is all of the Riot Games is one of our big partners, so that's going to be pretty fun. But Doug, can you tell everybody exactly what you do? What is sports marketing and communications?
Yeah,
I tried to give a brief summary, but I butchered it. So can you just take the baton?
We're the storytellers. So we get to be embedded. So Julie's team gets to work and build out the technical roadmaps for these partners, kind of really set that vision of what's possible. And then we get to go and tell this story to our customers, to the fans of those leagues. And really the great thing about the way that AWS and these sports partners work is that I think we either add value for the league itself, for the viewing experience, or the exact fan experience. So that's we have some substance behind the relationships that we have with these sports partners. So that means that the stories get to be pretty fun.
Yeah, I mean, talking to you and Ari is one of Doug's teammates, talking to them about what the topics are and what all we've got our hands involved with all these different sports is always really fun. So before we dive into some of that stuff, I got to ask, who is your team or who is your sport? I know you're a little bit sad right now. So,
so I grew up in the Bay Area. I'm a 49ers fan. I live in Seattle. That's tough. And then just to put more salt in the wound, I'm an A's fan. So maybe in a couple of years, I might be a free agent. I don't know who I'm going to be rooting for. Maybe the Giants, but we'll see.
At this point, you're just going to move to Vegas. That's like Oakland East now.
It's brutal. But yeah, Vegas is making a play in those Oakland teams. But yeah, at least my 49ers, they moved from San Francisco to Santa Clara. So maybe it's me. I think maybe I got to start looking some internally that maybe I'm the problem.
Absolutely. You got, I mean, at least you got Brock Purdy fall back on.
Hey,
right?
you know,
You got Shanahan.
Mr. Irrelevant, you know,
just ignore the A's for now and rip that Band-Aid off. If we've got any other A's fans in the comments, you guys can commiserate with Doug as we go along here. I know Debbie in the comments, running the comments on the AWS On Air handle. She's a big Niners fan, so you made her night. Made the rest of us a nightmare for our team meeting tomorrow. She's going to be way too excited. So kind of getting into how we work with these sports partnerships. You told me you're the storytellers, right, of how we go about these partnerships. So how do you tell what's a good story to tell?
Well, with a lot of these sports partners, especially traditionally, it's you put a logo on the side of a wall or a jersey. And there's not much in depth that goes on beyond that. And I think one of the opportunities that we have is because AWS is either powering, you know, the back end technology of really how either the production's working or the player tracking. You know, I'll give you an example. F1, obviously we got the millions of data points that are coming off of an F1 car in real time. Yeah. But we also did high power compute to figure out how do we increase or how do we improve the F1 car itself, the design of the car. So
you guys are involved with the actual like building of these racing machines. I didn't know that until just now. So
it's the aerodynamics of how, you know, they're running basically on these simulators. And so how do you make these cars more competitive so that you increase, again, the experience for the fans as an exciting thing to watch. So, you know, I know Red Bull right now is pulling away. That's very true. However, they continue to look and optimize these vehicles so that they can, especially in motorsports, to make it more competitive. And so that's something that we are involved in with these leagues, and then also helping teams too in the motorsport space. But how do we tell the story? We figure out how this is going to impact the league, and if there's some ties back to our customers. I mean, at the end of the day, we're trying to really bring to light what's possible with AWS. And that allows for us to get embedded with these partnerships because I think people are interested in sports. And then how's that use case apply back to, say, a smart factory or to Julie's earlier point, the medical field or the financial space, right? And so our job in that story is to both bring out the fandom and make fans more aware of the back-end technology that's happening behind the scenes, but also how this can be applicable to any of our customers, regardless of industry.
Yeah, and we're having some comments now. A lot of people are excited that we're involved with the cars. I was shocked by that fact too. But I want to call out a different comment too, talking about VAR in soccer, or so the Europeans don't get angry, or the rest of the world doesn't get angry at me, football. So like, I know we're going to be talking about the Bundesliga a little bit later, so we'll circle back to that, but I wanted to make sure we saw your comment. I think we'll have some interesting answers coming up here. But Doug, I know we were talking about, we kind of start with the audience and work backwards from that, right? You were telling me before the show about the NFL schedule being a good example. Like you said, NASCAR, a terabyte of content, I think, is produced each race, right? Can you speak a little bit to how we communicated those stories out too?
Yeah, NASCAR is a great example because they went down, they updated their car. So they have the next gen car that they're now racing around the track. Each one of those cars has a computer unit, and there's camera vision, or there's cameras around the racetracks. All that data is going to the cloud. I think so. There's cameras inside the car. There's cameras around the track.
Like during the actual races, these cameras are on the car.
Yeah. So Julie mentioned the Chicago street race as a great example. I think it was, she said 50, I think it was about 60 different camera angles.
56 or something. Yeah.
Yeah. That you could select as a fan, and that was on-prem. But when these broadcasters are trying to bring these stories to life, they also have a similar problem that you mentioned with the PGA, where not every shot, not every battle during a 400, 500 lap race is going to be able to be shown. Yeah. And so we're also giving, and a lot of NASCAR fans have two screens up. They have their main broadcast screen, and then also their computer or app up. And the app has is powered by AWS. They've got data that's in video streams that are coming to that too. So how do we tell those stories? We make sure that people know the services that are used. I mean, there's 200 plus services that AWS has.
That's crazy.
So you have all, and they all kind of work together, and it can be complicated. I mean, these are generally complicated use cases, can be edge use cases, meaning that they're a mix of both on-prem, so they've servers there, also cloud. And how do you kind of combine all that? And I came from before joining this AWS Sports side, I came from the product side, product marketing for our robotics, IoT, so Internet of Things, and quantum computing. So it's that edge use case was always fascinating to me. How do you combine these complicated workloads and still be able to deliver results for someone who's non-technical? I'm a non-technical person.
Right, yeah, you and I are of the same ilk here.
Right. But I still need to interact with the data. I still need to make decisions off that data. So the NASCAR story, just to finish that thought. So there's data coming off the car. It's going into the cloud. It then is in almost real time going to the broadcaster. So they're being able to create a better fan experience during the broadcast. It's going to the teams. So the teams are using data to be able to make real time, multi-million-dollar decisions. Do you pit? Do you keep going? The F1 is box, push.
Yeah.
So you've got both the broadcasters, the teams, and then also fans. Like I mentioned, have multiple screens up while they're watching it, and that end to end is AWS. I mean, in the back end, and NASCAR has a really innovative way to look at it and approach. And to me, that's one of the more interesting use cases. And again, a lot of our sports partners have similar use cases, but the motorsport space in particular lends itself because there's so many different things that are being tracked with these vehicles, and that has to be in real time.
Yeah. For folks living out there or watching out there, I'm actually in Tennessee now. Just recently moved down here. I did not know anything about NASCAR until I came down here. It's a little bit more of a big sport down here. And all of these different things, even for like a new fan like me, someone new to the sport, it was so cool to be able to kind of see and hear and, understand that strategy more, because I had access to all these different camera angles and different strategies. And at the time, I had no idea I was watching something that AWS powered. So it was really cool to go back and be like, oh man, like I work for the people that does this. Should really read up on that a bit more. And I feel like that happens in every single sport now, where I watch it, or Riot games in the esports side, where I'm like, oh, this is actually like what we do. My friends ask me now, if I work for AWS, I can point to them like, hey, that commercial, like that's what I do.
Well, Riot's such an interesting one too, because you've got a game company that grew on AWS. Yeah. And then so they moved over, as their game development started to move over onto the cloud. And then they have a goal to decommission their data centers and really move. It's a combination, again, that edge combination where they've got local zones and outposts, and then also AWS Cloud. And their challenge is they can't have latency, right? You can't, that shooter's advantage in sports. If you've ever played a video game and someone is able to see around the corner and you've got a little bit of lag, they can't afford that, right? It's bad game experience. So another great example of how it's a customer that pushed us. How are we going? And it's global, right? You've got a global, millions of people are playing it. How do you support it? And how do you have no latency? And I think any business that's going to needs to have a global infrastructure, with global customer base, like Riot is a great example of AWS being able to deliver, and again, deliver with no latency and with a lot of confidence with that customer.
Yeah, I think a lot of the people just in my everyday life, like friends and family, don't typically know what AWS is, right? Because we're more back end. I mentioned that I was doing this and would be talking about, some Riot game use cases at some point to some of my friends and like my cousin that's really big into video games. And they about tore my head. It was the first time I got a reaction saying that I work with AWS. So I know we've got some really excited people talking about that specific use case. And it is really cool because they did build it on our platform, and it's cool to be involved in something kind of from the start like that. So as we're wrapping up here, what is something you want to communicate overall to both our customers and sports fans in general watching this with us right now?
I think we're in this really interesting moment where I think there's a flywheel. The more educated I can be about my sports, it's basically my entertainment, the more I'm going to consume it, right? And so our role is to make sure that you understand some of the nuances, the background, and whether that you use that for your fantasy football draft, whether you use that just so you can, be more educated at the bar when you're talking, or just enjoy and be able to sit back and enjoy it. I think that flywheel of we're giving you beyond of what you just see with just your eyes. We're giving the data behind why certain decisions were made. I think that empowers you as a fan to be, more engaged, be smarter in that experience, and then you almost demand more from your sport. And I think that's, we turn back to our sports leagues or sports teams. I mean, as a 49er fan, we got 3 quarterbacks. Well, last year we had a lot of injuries at quarterback. Keep 3 quarterbacks, right? So you become more invested, I think, in that, in those teams, in those experiences. And I think it's a beautiful flywheel, because I think sports are a great way that we as a society come together. So that's, to me, that's the exciting part about what we get to power, and we get to be a part of it in the background to educate fans.
Yeah, it's really cool to be a part of. I love that we're doing this show to learn more about, what all your team does. 'Cause it's like something that's front facing, but not a lot of people know the details of. So I'm super excited to try to shed some light on it and kind of walk people through these use cases as I learn with them what the heck is going on here. We did get a quick question about Riot Games. How much criticism should we give AWS for lag then? I think the clear answer for that is it's your internet provider, probably. AWS is perfect, and it's not us or the game developers. So you can quote me on that. I think that's the clear answer. So, Doug,
that makes sense.
As we're wrapping up the show here, what can you and I have been working on the next couple of episodes. Again, we're going to be airing every other Thursday for the next foreseeable future, with a different focus each week on a different professional league. Can you kind of give us an insight into what's coming up on September 7th? We were just talking about that this morning.
Yeah, we've got the Bundesliga coming up, and their director of innovation, who's going to be speaking about, what the Bundesliga is doing. I think they've got 3 different real big pillars that they focus on. So fan experience. So we talked about Bundesliga match facts, production, which they call kind of that end-to-end glass experience. So when you're looking at the camera on site that captures the game, and all the way to the TV or the mobile device that you're watching it on. And then their operations, how they optimize in the back end. And in some ways really been a leader in the soccer or football world with the way that they've been able to develop and embrace tech for their fans. So excited to have the Bundesliga on the show. Excited to be doing this. Nick, thanks for pushing this. I think it will be, really excited to share. It's not just shed light, but share these stories more. Because I think that people will have an appreciation of what they're seeing, whether it be the next gen stats for the NFL, whether it be an F1 insight, Bundesliga match fact, or a win expectancy on a Riot game gaming broadcast.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I know some of the things we can look forward to in that episode that we'll be talking about. Some of those match facts, like the new keeper match fact that just came up, like what's the save probability, and kind of helping us be able to get bragging rights on our favorite team. The broadcasting thing should be super interesting, with kind of taking some of that stuff to the cloud. Like, I'm really excited for that. Remember, everybody, that's going to be coming up on September 7th. But Doug, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Shout out to our audience too. They've been going here. I know we kind of were joking about the AWS to blame for the Riot Games thing, but
that causes story, sure, huh?
Yeah. It's been really fun having you on, though. Can't wait to keep diving into these use cases with you and your team. So thanks for joining us tonight, Doug.
Appreciate it, Nick.
Whoop. Okay. Gotta love technical difficulties on my end there. So thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. We'll go ahead and wrap up the show. Again, my name's Nick Betts. I will be coming at you every other Thursday for the foreseeable future for this new show called AWS On Air Sports, where we are going to be talking about all these different sports use cases, everywhere from NFL, NHL, Bundesliga, to the Riot Games and the PGA, discussing how cloud computing is actually involved in all these pro sports that we watch every day and we don't even know it. I'm really excited to get into some of these details with you all. Thank you so much. Shout out to Taylor, my producer here, and Debbie in the comments. And everybody else has been kind of watching and commenting as we go here. I appreciate your participation. Also, Debbie is dropping a link in the chat here to a survey. If y'all could take 5 minutes and fill that out, I'd love to hear your feedback and kind of what use cases you want to see on the show coming up here. And the first 50 respondents are going to get $10 in free AWS credits. So go ahead and check out that link we just dropped. And thanks for joining us tonight, everybody. Have a great Friday.